morning about conscious parenting. So most people here have kids, right? I have 3 kids, ages 4, 6, and 15. And I have to say that parenting was a lot harder than what I thought it was going to be. And so, right, yeah. We all thought, oh, this is going to be an easy job, you know? But parenting has so much to it. It's not really just the survival, right? Let's make sure they're safe, let's make sure they're fed, let's make sure that they get to bed on time, which that enough takes up most of our time. And part of what I want to talk about today is how we really want to be able to look at kids' physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, because there's so much more to raising a child. And how can we as parents, we as mothers, really be able to connect into ourselves and know and be in a calm spot and be in a place where we can look at all those different things with our children. I know that very often for me, especially now, my children just started, my youngest is in preschool, my second is in 1st grade, and then I have one in high school. And all of a sudden we're in that school routine again, right? And we got to get them up and we got to get them out the door at a certain time. And I was talking to a mother this morning, and all of a sudden, all of those ideas we had, those great ideas that we had about how we're going to do it, we're not going to get upset, and we're not going to yell at them, just go out the window at 6:57 in the morning. So one of the things that I want to talk about is we look at kids and we say, well, we're going to look at them and take care, make sure they're dressed in their clothes and all those things. But one of the things that I've found over the 11 years that I've been doing this work is that we really need to address our children from their spirits. If we remember, you know, when they were in our tummies and when they came in, you know, they have this spirit and they have this reason for being on the planet. And we're simply here to guide them. And sometimes we get a little too caught up in the guiding on the ground, and we forget about the guiding in the spirit. And one of the things that I've really found is really beneficial with kids is if you start to really talk to them and talk to their spirits and say, you know, good morning, how are you? How's your spirit this morning? Help them start to connect into that part of who they are. Because do you know, in your own prayer, right, or your own meditation, if you stop and you calm and you get to connect into your own spirit, don't you feel better in the day? Right? Even if it's 2 minutes, and most moms, it's probably 2 minutes in the bathroom, right? Because that's the only place that we have a little time. So if you start teaching them at a very young age to start connecting in, and the easiest way to do this is just have them put their hand on their heart and breathe into their heart. Say, okay, hon, breathe into your heart. Let's just talk to your spirit for a minute. What's your spirit have to say? And help them start understanding that mind-body connection, that spirit-body connection. Because that really, really helps them understand that they're more of just these cells in this body. That they actually, at a very young age, can start to understand that when you guys talk to each other in that spirit place, that you'll be able to communicate at a deeper level. And you'll be amazed at how this works. This morning I woke up and my son Caden was on my left side, and I could feel he was really, really angry. And I had no idea why. We just woke up, right? Have you ever had this happen? You're like, did you get up on the wrong side of the bed? What happened? And I could feel, and so the first thing he does is he digs his chin into my chest, right? You know how good that felt. And I took a deep breath and I thought, wow, this little guy is really angry this morning. How come he's so angry? So instead of going into it, because he's 4, now he's not going to be able to tell me all the different reasons that he's angry this morning, is he? Instead, I just closed my eyes and I said a forgiveness prayer to him. And I just started forgiving him in the spirit. And I'm like, okay, you are whole and you are innocent. I forgive you and I let you go. And what happened is his whole mood shifted. All of a sudden, whatever it was that it was affecting him, it no longer affected him anymore. And so he then was like, okay, mommy, now I can get up and I can help. And nobody teaches this. It's like nobody teaches, oh yeah, we came in, we're a spirit in a body. We all have a plan. We all have a divine plan. So it's so important to be able to really connect into that part of a little boy or a little girl and to be able to start seeing that part of them. And I think that where that becomes so important is when they start to make friends and when they start to go to school, then they're going to start seeing kids that have that connection, and they're going to start choosing better friends, and they're going to start choosing better playmates, because we only really have that first 6 years. You'll have to excuse me, I'm actually stepping in water, and I realize that's silly. Okay, so we only have that first 5 or 6 years, and we have them pretty much all the time, right? I mean, except for preschool a couple days a week. But once they reach 6 years old, they actually spend more time in school, especially during the week, than they do with us. So that first 6 years is so important. And one of the things that happens, especially really young, is that if you have 2 or 3 or 4 kids, there's often one child who's taken most of the attention. You guys kind of know that? It's like one child is like, give me all the attention, and the other 2 may get a little lost. And so one of the things that I found is really bringing together your family and talking to them about being a team. And we're a team on every level. I was talking to this wonderful man yesterday who has taken care of kids and taught kids for years, and he says, well, you know, siblings, they're just meant to fight with each other. That's just what they do. They work stuff out. And I thought, well, somewhat that's true, but they're also meant to really help and care and protect each other. And so we really need to help them do that, and we need to help them find ways of not having conflict and just kind of beating each other up, which I don't know about you guys, but when I grew up, and especially my dad who helps take care of my kids grew up, you just kind of, as kids, you just kind of beat each other up and that was it, and then you moved on. And now we've become parents that say, well, no, we don't want that. But then how do we do this? How do we help our kids, our siblings, work together so they're not actually hurting each other and they're actually helping each other? And one of the ways to work with this is really looking at helping them understand at a very early age service. And service, what we don't get as moms is we think that we have to do everything, right? Oh my gosh, I have to get this boys' stuff, and I have to get the lunches for this person, and I have to get this for my husband, I have to get this, and pretty soon we are fragmented and running all over the place and exhausted. What we don't realize is that our kids, most of them like to be in service. They like to help their mommy. Now, if it's go pick up your toys, no. But if you say, wow, you know what, this will really help mommy because we're gonna get the whole house clean before daddy gets here, let's make a game of it, let's set a timer. We love the timers, right? Because kids love games, so we love timers. Let's set a timer and let's see how quickly we can clean the house. Or my kids know, do you guys have problems getting your kids in the car and getting them buckled and stuff like that, right? And it's just like, oh my gosh, I started this process 45 minutes ago and we still haven't left the garage, right? So the thing to do is make it a game. All right, let's get out there, see who can get in first and buckle the fastest. My kids go racing out the door to see who can buckle the fastest, right? This is my daughter, Dakota. So it is just so important for us to think about it in their age frame. So we're looking at it going, oh, how old is, what does my 4-year-old think is fun? What does my 5-year-old think is fun? How can I bring them all together as a team? Because as they're brought together with a team and you're the coach, you're the leader, right? Then they start to do something that's called being entrained to you. And being entrained to you is basically matching your energy and matching who you are. So instead of being in a fight with them, instead of being in polarity with them, you got to clean up your toys right now. And instead of doing that, you enlist them in help. And you enlist them in how it is that they can help and be in service. And that's really what helps your kids grow up to be better people. And it helps them starting at a very young age, understanding that they're not just here to play. And I love play, so it's not that I don't like play. But we've become a generation of thinking that our kids should just get to play all the time, because we grew up in a generation where we were so structured. You had to do this, you had to do that, you had to sit quietly here, you had to sit quietly there. It's better to be seen and not heard, right? and our grandparents even more so. Well, we want to break those intergenerational ties, but we don't want to swing so far over that we have a whole generation of very entitled human beings, which we seem to be getting a lot of those, right? Right, our kids who get everything. We had people down the street the other day who, it was their twins' 16th birthday. And so we drove up our road, and here's this long stretch limousine. And I'm like, are you crazy? And not in a state of judgment, but just how much do these kids know? Do they know the economics of it? Do they know the carbon footprint of it? Do they know what it took for their parents to do that for them? And is that really teaching them anything that's going to help them be service people? Because when we get down to it, we all have to get very straight with who are we in our spirit and what is our job on the planet, right? And we're looking at that from who our spirit is, and then we're looking at it as who we are as individuals, and then we're looking at it as who we are with others, and then we're looking at it in who we are in the planet and how can we help create a better planet. So if we're not using those 4 different ways to help our kids grow, who am I in the spirit? Hi, let your kids talk to their spirit. Let them know, wow, you're bigger than this body. You have more going on. You have a job on the planet to do that no one else can do. Because every single one of our kids, every single one of us has a job that nobody else can do. We are trained exactly for it. Now, most of us probably don't know exactly what that is yet. But we're all working towards that and teaching that at a very young age so that our kids know, okay, I have something to do on the planet. The first thing that I can do is I can help my mom. The second thing I can do is I can help my whole family. And then the third thing is I can help recycle, I can help at my church, I can help all these different ways, because once you help a child see that they're of value, that there's a reason that they're here, then they start to line up with their spirit. And it can sound so etheric, like, oh yeah, sure, how do I do that when I'm in the middle of a grocery store and my kid is screaming, right? I've been there. And here's what you do. Your kid is screaming and you have a choice in that moment, right? And you say, is it so important that I get these groceries right now? And it may be, you have a choice to make. Or is it more important that in this moment, there's something that's going on with my 4-year-old son that I need to find out, right? And so most of the times you can at least take 5 minutes in the middle of the store or even walk out of the store to say, what's really going on with you? Because most kids don't just throw a fit just to throw a fit. There's something happening with them. And so, no, my dad would say that our family overprocesses everything because I am so much like, what's going on with you right now? But there is a way that without, going to the nth degree that I may do, you can still stop and say, well, what's going on? Because they're not going to throw a fit if there isn't a reason. Now, their reason may be very different than yours, but sometimes just that acknowledgement in that moment, that acknowledgement, looking them in the eye and giving them the attention is what they need. And maybe not. Maybe as a mom, we overdid it. And we're on our 4th stop, and our kid should have had a nap an hour ago, and we just got to get this done. And in those moments, it's really important to then stop ourselves and say, what pattern am I running? Because the thing that I know that I have seen over and over and over is whatever stuff we as moms and dads don't clear up in our own lives, we get to watch in our kids. And I say get to kind of tongue in cheek because, ew, to watch some of that stuff that we did not clear up in ourselves. If our mom was overbearing, or if we came from an abusive family, we want to be so far away from what our parent was that we go to the other end, or before we know it, we're like, oh my God, I sound just like my mother, right? I can't believe I'm doing this. Excuse me. So one of the things that's really important is to start looking at yourself. And one of the things that I tell mothers is keep a journal at night. And it doesn't have to be a long journal, because I don't know about you guys, but by about 8:30 when I put the kids to bed, I'm like, night, hon, I gotta go to bed. But if you keep a journal and start looking at, well, what is playing out in my daughter, or what is playing out in my son that played out in my life? And how is that either working in our lives, or how is that not working in our lives? How would I want to change that? And you'll start to notice these patterns, and you'll say, oh, wait a minute, that's just the way my mom did it when I thought I was doing it different. And I'm not bashing on our moms, you know, because our moms did the best job they could in the moment. And just like we're doing the best job that we can in the moment. But I'm one of those people that I always want to do better. I'm like, I know, oh, if I did that once good, okay, I can do that better. If I did that once really bad, then I really want to do it better. But one of the things that I know that most of us want is to have our kids grow up and be better than we are, right? To be able to really reach their potential and do what they really can do in their lives. And so oftentimes we decide that just good enough is okay. And sometimes we have to make that decision because of a time factor or a financial factor or those things. But if we, in our own psyches, in our own spirits, are saying, what can I do? What is it that I need to do in my own life to help my child grow farther, be better, do what they're meant to do on the planet? That's what we're really looking for. Because all of us have patterns in our own lives that play out in our households. And we start to look at, well, you know, why is it that my 4-year-old every night when we sit down for dinner freaks out and runs away from the table? And so what do we think? Oh, he just doesn't want to eat. He just doesn't want to eat. He won't eat what I gave him. I made this great dinner and he won't eat it. And so then we get upset, right? But what if instead we looked around and said, well, how is this not inviting for him? What is it? Why is this not inviting for him? And we said, hey, you know what? Tonight, hon, why don't you say the prayer? Why don't you start with what it is? Because oftentimes, now, you know, 3 and 4-year-olds, they're testing, right? That's their job. Their job is to test. They're going to see how far they can push us. And the thing that I know is true from all of the developmental psychology is if we don't set those boundaries for them, but also invite them in when they're 3 or 4, when they're 13, 14, and 15, they're going to test again. And testing at 13, 14, and 15 is so much harder because there's so many more things that they can test with than when they're 3 or 4. And so setting those boundaries. So yeah, it's important for you, Caden, who's my son, to come to dinner. Let me invite you in, and let me also hold this boundary. And oftentimes what we decide is, well, we get upset and they can feel our anger, and then when they can feel our anger, it makes them run away. It makes them angry themselves, and they don't know why. Because what we've found is what one child represses, or one parent represses, the others express. So if the mom is there and she's repressing all this anger and she's so upset, you can just watch one of those kids, whoever's your most empathic child, is going to all of a sudden go bonkers, you know, and start throwing stuff or yelling or doing one of those things, because all the kids are so open that they can feel what's going on with us. And so we really live in 2 different ways, because some of society says, oh, well, keep it from the kids. Don't tell them what's going on. You know, this is too much for them. But I come from a place where I'm like, yeah, you don't have to tell them all the details of what's happening, but it's important for them to know, you know, if mommy and daddy are fighting, then they need to know that that's an okay thing. They need to be talked to so they understand why they're feeling this in their body and why it feels so scary for them. And so it's really, really important that we understand that they're not just these, you know, cute little blobs, that they actually physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything that we do affects them. And when we're doing that, it stays in their nervous system. So I'm a chiropractor, and we do a type of work that really works with, we work with the software of the body. Most chiropractors work with the hardware, they move the bones. We work with the brain and the spinal cord and really work with the patterning and the software of the body. And one of the things that the psychoneuroimmunologists have found is that the subconscious mind is in the spine. So everything that happens to us goes into our body and into our spine, and it stays there and starts to create a pattern in our life. I mean, is that scary or what, right? But it does. So part of what we have to do, and when we are not able to feel, if something really scary happens, if we are not able to feel all of our emotion of what happened at the time, if we say to our kids, stop crying, that's not okay, then it gets locked in their spine. And when it gets locked in their spine, it starts to create a pattern. And it'll be a pattern in their own body mind, looking at their hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. So this is their fight or flight, and saying, oh wow, this isn't okay. And they lock down one part of their body. And then something else happens, and they fall down, they get hurt, and instead of feeling it, oh, it's not bleeding, it's okay. I hate that, by the way. It just makes me crazy. Because they feel it. I mean, yeah, it's not bleeding. We know we don't have to take them to the hospital, but it doesn't mean that inside them, they're not having a very real feeling of pain. And one of the things that we do and that we teach people to do is help them reconnect to that spot in their body. And so we say, if you skinned your knee, okay, put your hand on your knee and breathe into it. Because what this does is creates a neurological pathway between your brain and your knee using your hand and using breath that will help your body not pattern into a place of dis-ease. It will pattern back into your place of ease. So whenever, and my kids have, it's called somatorespiratory integration, and my kids have done this most of their lives. We have the story of when my oldest was 8, they were playing at school, and a little girl fell down and hit her head on the piano. And the teacher wasn't around, and so Joya came and took the little girl and put her head in her lap and started taking her hands and doing SRI to her head. And all the kids were around, and all of a sudden the girl sat up, she was crying, and she sat up, she says, okay, I'm good, let's go play now. And all the teacher walked over, and she's like, what happened? But there was no resonance of how scary that had been for everybody, because they had been able to actually connect back into the body-mind part of it. And so it's so important for us to realize that we have so much more to give to our children, and so much more that they can give back to us. Any questions? So let me talk a little bit about one of the things that I really found was really important, because I had 2 girls first, so then I had a boy, and boy, that was a different experience. All of a sudden, from 2 nice, calm girls who said pretty much everything I wanted them to, they did pretty well, I went to the boy who has to go all the time and run all the time, and I really felt like he was really my teacher, and he still is, because he's only 4. But one of the things that I really realized in this process is that it's important to be able to let them be who they are, but it's also really, really important to keep them moving in a direction of taking care of themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually at a very young age. And one of the ways that this really happened with my son is that my son has multiple food allergies and multiple environmental allergies. And so at a very young age, he couldn't eat very many foods at all. So I had to help him learn that he couldn't have wheat, and he couldn't have corn, and he couldn't have dairy, and he couldn't have soy, and that somehow he was still okay, even though he wasn't getting to have all these things that everybody else has. And so we went to a fabulous MD homeopath in Las Vegas who gave us these allergy drops that would help him to be able to not have such an extreme reaction, because he would get eczema throughout his body and tummy aches to the point that he would be awake crying and screaming for 3 nights. And so it was really no way to live. So one of the things that I learned with him and that he really taught me was that you have to be able to go slow enough in your life to teach them what they need. So with Caden, it was like, honey, you can't have these foods, but it's without these foods that you'll be healthy. It's without these things that you'll actually be able to do everything you want to do in your life. And then as he's gotten older, now he's 4, and he really wants to test, I'll let him test. And I'll say, you really shouldn't have that food because you won't feel healthy, you won't feel good. And he'll say, well, I want to not feel good right now. And I'll say, well, all right, you get to make that decision right now, but I want you to know that you're not going to feel good. And so I'll let him have a little weed or something. I mean, luckily he doesn't have anaphylactic shock or anything like that. And the next day he'll wake up and he'll be scratching and scratching. And I bring it back to that. Caden, this was the choice you made. Maybe next time you can make a better decision. And we've done that 3 or 4 times now, luckily only 3 or 4 times, to a point where he's actually said, yeah, there's some of those things he knows. He will feel, Mommy, I won't feel good if I eat that. Mommy, that will make my tummy hurt. And so at 4 years old, he's able to be in his preschool and actually go, no, I can't eat that. And my 6-year-old is the same way. She'll be like, they'll have cupcakes in her school, and she'll say, does that have red dye in it? And they'll say, yeah, probably. And she'll say, I can't have that. That has red dye. And so, and my next learning on that was how to have them gracefully and graciously be able to say that. So it wasn't like, oh, yuck, not red dye. And instead it was like, oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But, you know, I just don't eat that. And so each thing I find is just a learning of how can we be in our lives that show them each way. And I go back to this time when I was in my early 30s and I was pregnant, and my uncle says to me, well, you know, any pattern that you have that you don't fix, you're going to get to see in your kids. And I started thinking about, well, what would that look like? And I realized that there were a lot of things that I needed to clean up in myself and in my own heart. And so what I started doing is I started doing forgiveness prayers. And I started praying forgiveness prayers pretty much all the time. And then when my kids came, I realized that they didn't realize about forgiveness as well. And that in their own hearts, that I could start see the patterning in their own hearts when they would start to hold a grudge, whether it was against a sibling or against a friend. And I realized that I needed to teach them very early on what it was like to be in forgiveness and to be in that state of forgiveness all the time. So I taught him this prayer, and the prayer says, you use the person's name. So I'll use my son Caden because I forgive him a lot. and it says, Caden, you are spirit, whole and innocent. All is forgiven and released. And this prayer, I tell people, because I use it a lot in my practice as well, that if you are in any way holding sadness or madness or a grudge or anything against people, it stays in your energy system. And when it stays in your energy system, it starts to throw you off. And we all really want to be more connected to who we are. So it's really important for us to be able to, I call it the corral, to open the corral and let those people out that we somehow, if we've judged, if anything, and begin to forgive them. So my kids and I will actually we'll actually look and say, well, who is it today who is it that we need to look at? Who do we need to forgive? What happened today? And we'll start to go through this. And then we switch from forgiveness to gratitude. Because the things that really help open the energy system of our body are forgiveness and gratitude. So teaching children at a very young age, forgiveness and gratitude. We sit down at the table every night and we say, what are you most grateful for? What happened today that you are most grateful for today? And they each go around and they talk about what they're grateful for, because we're instilling in them at a very young age how to be forgiving, how to be grateful, and how to be in service. And I go back to that place where, you know, we all start and we're all spirit. And as spirits, we're really here to do something on the planet. And so we really want to be able to take who we are as spirit, create the boundaries of who we are, then be able to give in the world and to be able to give to our planet so that we can make it a better place. So, hi Barb. So that's really my message, is that we're really, even in the middle of the hardest day, if we can stop and just say, what does this little spirit need right now? What's going on in this little guy's spirit or this little girl's spirit? that it will start in your own nervous system. It actually activates another part of the brain. Instead of being in your own survival part of the brain, it actually activates the prefrontal cortex of your brain. And it allows you to start looking at things from a bigger concept, and then it allows your children to start looking at things from that bigger place, at whatever age they are. And that's really the message, is just remember, we're looking at these little spirits that can be amazing beings. And sometimes they can be little terrors. I mean, they can be. But it's okay, because even in that moment of being a little terror, they're trying to get a message across. And we're not going to be perfect. I'm so far from perfect. but every time we just try. And when we're not perfect, the hardest thing for moms to do, right, is forgive ourselves. So start using those prayers on ourselves. You know, I mean, there was a time this morning when I was getting ready. I have this beautiful little box that has vibhuti in it, and I don't know if any of you know what vibhuti is, but it's a sacred ash that comes from Sai Baba, who actually isn't on the planet anymore, so you can't get it. And this morning I pulled it out just to, you know, just as a blessing, and my 6-year-old daughter came by, said, "What's that?" Boom, vibhuti all over my floor, and I'm just like, oh. I mean, it's, you know, there's not a whole lot of stuff that I treasure, but I did. That was something that I really, really treasured. And I mean, in that moment, I felt myself, I rarely ever want to do harm to my children. But in that moment, I thought, I'm going to have to kill you. And so all I could do is look at her and say, you need to walk away. Because I knew I couldn't walk away because I had this mess of vibhuti to clean up. And I just looked at her and she just backed away. And I said, you just need to go into another room right now. Because, and to me, that was the only tone I could use, because I wanted to go, I'm gonna kill you. But I knew, and so I didn't do it perfectly. You know, if I would have done perfectly, I would have never had that vibhuti out where she would have gotten to it. But that's not true. But in each of those moments, we have something to learn. It's like, and I kept saying to myself, okay, God, you knew that this was important to me. And so somehow in that moment, I had to decide that this really wasn't that important. It was more important that I didn't harm my child, but also more important that I didn't make that more important than her. Which in the moment, it felt like it was to me, like, how could you do this? But instead to say, I'm going to be able to talk to you in a little bit, but let me have my feelings. Let me go through what's happening in me first, so that then I can come to her clearer. And so by the time I did clean it up, and God bless God, because only a little of it spilt. It stayed in this little bag of thing. I still can't figure out how it actually stayed in there. I'm like, thank you, all my angels must have been there. But I went down to her and said, I know you're sorry. Because she was just like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I know you're sorry. It really wasn't about you. It was really about my feelings about what was happening with that stuff and how important I was making it. And that you didn't mean to do it. It was a mistake. And so in every moment like that, we have something to learn and something to teach our children. I write this blog. Well, I was writing this blog. It's called mysticmama.com. That I haven't been writing for a few months, only because I've been going through so much myself that I didn't really feel like I could even manage to write anything and talk about what it was that was happening yet. But in it, the thing that I talk about a lot is how every day there are things that we can do to really help our kids. One day, we're driving down the street and my daughter decides she wants to go to Ace Hardware and she wants to get all those different keys that have, the one's a rose and one's Hannah Montana and she wants to turn all of my keys into all these different colored keys because it would be beautiful for mommy, right? And what a sweet idea, right? What a great idea. And I'm thinking, each one of these keys is $4. I got about 7 keys. Do I really want to spend that much money on colored keys? And I'm like, well, no, I don't. I'd like a blouse. I'd like a, you know, it's like, that's just not where I'm choosing to put my money. But I realized in that moment, I was like, you know, I don't want to create poverty consciousness. So I don't want to say, oh no, honey, we don't have enough money for that. And I mean, there have been definitely times when we don't have enough money for that $300 car she wanted. But But I also wanted to be able to help her have a consciousness of how we spend our money. And so I said, well, you know, honey, they're $4 a piece, and I have about 7 keys. And so, that's probably more money than I really want to spend. Let me think about that, So with tax and everything, we're talking probably $35 worth of keys here. And I said, what could we spend $35 on? And so we started to play this game going down the road. Well, if I had $35, Mommy would like a blouse. Well, and Dakota would say, well, if I had $35, I'd want new flip-flops. And if I want, and then my son said, a Batman. And so we take those little things in our life and we start turning them into, how do we make good decisions? How do we make good choices in our life? So that even at something where, you can honor how beautiful what it was that she wanted to make, but also be able to say, well, yeah, but what if we want to make a different choice? Where would we put that money? And so to me, just that's the part that makes parenting conscious, is each moment we may not do everything right. Oh, we probably won't. But each moment, what we want to do is say, well, how can I make this something where they can learn one of these higher spiritual laws, where they can learn about service, where they can learn about abundance consciousness, where they can learn about how to care for others and care for the planet. And that's really what I think is what makes it so exciting these days, is that we actually have the possibility to talk about these things as mom and to talk about them via email or via internet or via Facebook and all those things, and help each other out, so we are raising that generation that really can be more than who we are.